Wole Soyinka's Madmen and Specialists, 1971, is one of his most haunting and politically charged plays. Written during and in the aftermath of the Nigerian Civil War, 1967 to 1970, and composed while Soyinka himself was in solitary confinement for 2 years, the play is a grim meditation on violence, the abuse of power, the corruption of ideals, and the breakdown of human ethics. It marks a radical departure from Soyinka's earlier, more optimistic dramas, replacing mythic and communal structures with a stark vision of a disintegrated world where madness and cruelty reign. Set in a vaguely defined, post-war society, Madmen and Specialists is a dark absurdist drama that defies clear resolution. Its characters are trapped in a cycle of fear, betrayal, and moral decay, highlighting the psychological and ideological damage wrought by war. Setting: the entire play takes place in a single room, the home of Dr. Barrow, a former idealistic medical doctor who has returned from war. The room, once a medical clinic, has become a site of imprisonment, torture, and philosophical debate. This claustrophobic setting reflects the mental and moral confinement of the characters and the wider post-war society. Characters: Dr. Barrow, a war veteran and physician-turned-state torturer. Once guided by humanitarian ideals, he has become an agent of cruelty. Old Man, Barrow's father, also a doctor. He is being held prisoner by his son in the same house. Blind and mutilated, he serves as a symbol of wisdom betrayed. 4 mendicants, beggars, blind, crippled, and insane. They linger around the house, echoing and distorting the themes of the play. They represent the madness of society and the collapse of rational discourse. Sister Rahila, Barrow's sister, or possibly nurse, who attempts to restore order and meaning but is ultimately powerless. Drummer and herbalist, off-stage references, mentioned figures who symbolize traditional African medicine and healing, now marginalized or corrupted. Plot overview: at the opening, the old man is being held captive by his own son, Dr. Barrow, who returns from the war having abandoned his previous ethical values. The old man, a rationalist and humanist, is blind and mutilated, symbolically stripped of his former authority. Barrow has transformed his clinic into a place of torture, where he interrogates, mutilates, and executes prisoners. He justifies his actions through philosophical rationalizations, claiming that pain is the only route to truth, and that the specialist, himself, has surpassed the limitations of ordinary human morality. The mendicants wander in and out, spouting fragments of philosophical nonsense, war propaganda, and absurdist songs. They reflect the madness of a world where values have collapsed. At times, their utterances seem like parodies of political slogans, religious chants, or medical diagnoses, blurring the boundaries between sanity and insanity, truth and delusion. In the final moments, Barrow prepares to eliminate the old man permanently, accusing him of being a threat to his authority. The play ends not with resolution, but with the continuation of violence and decay, as madness consumes the household and, by implication, the nation. Major themes: 1. The corruption of idealism. Dr. Barrow begins his career as a healer and humanitarian, echoing the Hippocratic Oath and Enlightenment rationalism. However, the war transforms him into a state torturer, someone who inflicts pain in the name of truth and order. His descent represents the corruption of ideals under the pressures of war, power, and fear. Soyinka critiques the tendency of post-colonial regimes to turn against their own values, replacing the dreams of independence with tyranny. The same doctors and intellectuals who promised liberation become the agents of oppression. 2. Madness as metaphor. The play's title invokes the central binary of madmen and specialists, but these categories collapse as the drama unfolds. The mendicants, who are supposed to be mad, often speak the most piercing truths, though cloaked in absurdity. The specialist, Drive, Barrow, claims authority, but his actions are sadistic and irrational. Soyinka suggests that madness is not merely psychological but political, a condition inflicted by war, ideology, and the loss of ethical grounding. The world of the play is upside down, doctors torture, patients preach, and reason has become a disguise for violence. 3. The aftermath of war. The play reflects Soyinka's disillusionment with the Nigerian Civil War, in which intellectuals and soldiers alike became complicit in atrocities. War is not glorified but shown to dehumanize and demoralize, turning former healers into killers and citizens into beasts. The trauma of war lingers long after the fighting ends. The society depicted in the play is not rebuilding, it is stagnant, fearful, and spiritually diseased. 4. Authority and rebellion. The dynamic between Dr. Barrow and the old man dramatizes the conflict between generational values, between authoritarianism and dissent. Barrow seeks to silence his father's legacy, fearing that his wisdom threatens his new power. This father-son conflict reflects broader anxieties about tradition, conscience, and the transmission of values. Barrow's refusal to listen symbolizes the death of dialogue, replaced by coercion and surveillance. 5. Silence, speech, and the collapse of language. Language is central to the play, its breakdown, distortion, and manipulation. The mendicants speak in riddles and repetitions. The old man's wisdom is ignored. Barrow's language is cold and abstract, masking cruelty. Soyinka demonstrates how language, when severed from truth and empathy, becomes a tool of madness and control. The play reflects a crisis of communication, where words no longer heal but confuse or destroy. Character analysis. Dr. Barrow. Barrow is the embodiment of post-colonial betrayal. He is intelligent, articulate, and formerly idealistic. Yet war and ambition transform him into a brutal specialist in pain. He speaks in philosophical language, quoting concepts about truth, discipline, and authority, but all in service of domination and fear. Barrow is terrifying not because he is irrational, but because he rationalizes evil. He represents the new class of African elites who, in the name of order, adopt the violent tactics of former colonial masters. The old man. Blind and mutilated, the old man is a tragic figure, perhaps the moral conscience of the play. He represents the older generation of thinkers and healers, now silenced and imprisoned. His dialogues challenge Barrow's justifications, yet he is powerless to stop the rising tide of madness. The old man is also a Christ-like figure, a martyr whose suffering exposes the inhumanity of the new regime. His blindness evokes the image of the prophet who sees deeper truths. The mendicants. The 4 mendicants are both comic and terrifying. They appear as vagrants, crippled and blind, but they function as a chorus of the damned, echoing the absurdity of the world. Their garbled speech mixes folk wisdom, broken philosophy, and grotesque parody. They represent the destitution of the common people, driven mad by war and abandonment. They also question the very notion of sanity in a world gone mad. Structure and style. Soyinka's structure is circular and claustrophobic. The action takes place in one room, with characters trapped in cycles of interrogation, accusation, and philosophical debate. There is no clear plot arc or resolution, reflecting the existential and political deadlock. Stylistically, the play draws from absurdist drama, like Beckett or Ionesco, where logic is undermined and meaning is slippery. African ritual and symbolism, especially in the behavior of the mendicants. Dark satire, using grotesque humor to critique power. The tone is grim, ironic, and unrelenting. Symbolism. Blindness. Both literal, old man and mendicants, and metaphorical. Suggests loss of vision, wisdom, and moral clarity. However, the blind often see more than the sighted. The clinic, once a place of healing, now a torture chamber, symbolizes the corruption of institutions, How even medicine becomes a tool of the state. The drummer, unseen, a reference to African ritual, now reduced to background noise, signals the disconnection from spiritual roots. The specialist, a figure of scientific detachment turned monstrous, represents the danger of rationality without ethics. Historical and political context. Written during Soyinka's imprisonment by the Nigerian government during the Biafran War, Madmen and Specialists is a deeply personal and political text. It reflects his despair at the moral degradation of Nigerian society and his disillusionment with the intelligentsia and military alike. Soyinka believed that the artist's role was to be a moral witness, to speak out even when the world chose silence. In this play, he offers no comfort, only a mirror of the horror he saw around him. Conclusion. Madmen and Specialists is a searing indictment of war, tyranny, and the loss of moral compass. Through its intense psychological drama, grotesque imagery, and philosophical dialogues, the play confronts audiences with uncomfortable questions. Who defines sanity? What happens when healers become executioners? Can words still matter in a world gone mad? Wole Soyinka's vision is bleak, but necessary. In a society where power speaks louder than truth, madness may be the only honest response. Madmen and Specialists remains one of the most potent artistic expressions of post-colonial disillusionment and existential horror in African literature.